Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome to the GSMC Football Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brice. And today, it's going to be a pretty simplistic day on the podcast. We're going to finish up all of the NFC teams left from start to end. Just because there's not too much going on in the NFL right now. Probably not too much going to go on until we get closer to the draft in a couple of weeks. So, obviously, after today's show, I'm going to start going into Western Conference teams, which should lead me all the way up to the draft, and then we'll talk about draft recap and go from there. So that's kind of the plans for the next couple of weeks in the show. So if you enjoy what I'm doing, appreciate it. And, leave a comment, on whatever podcast, whatever format you're listening to me on. And, let's get into it. So, yeah, first NFC team we're doing today, we're going to do the New Orleans Saints. Trust me, I am a Falcons fan, but I am not biased. I'm a realist. I am not going to sit here and say they all suck because I want them to. I recognize the Saints are one of the best teams in the NFL, and they're one of the best rosters constructed in the NFL. Yes, it brings me joy to see them lose in the playoffs, but we can't deny them as a great team. Obviously, the Saints coming off the season, losing in the first round to Minnesota, a disappointing end to their season after having such a successful season. There were some things that happened. Obviously, the biggest one was Alvin Kamara had some injuries this year, and when he did play, he did not play like the running back we are used to seeing him play as. So, obviously, that was, not the greatest sight in the world for Saints fans, seeing Alvin Kamara not be the same guy he was 2 years ago. But maybe it was just because of the injuries this year. We'll see how he does with a full offseason of recovery. Obviously the Saints have a very prolific offense with, Kamara, Michael Thomas, Jared Cook. Honestly, they get most of their big plays from the three big players, and then it just kind of opens it up for everybody else. Drew Brees still going strong, going 41 into this next coming season. 40-year-old quarterback still playing well. He got hurt in the middle of the season last year, actually kind of towards the beginning, entering the last half of the first quarter, and Teddy Bridgewater took over, went 5-0, kept the team very, very much afloat. The team played well, played some of their best games, and that's why, the Saints have always been recognized as a team that you fought from that perspective. Like, they have the roster to compete for a championship, because even if Breeze goes down, they can still play well enough to win games. And I think that's something that really showed. I just think overall, the Saints, they've done a lot of good things for a long time. That Sean Payton, Drew Brees combination has been so successful for so long. And, everybody's expecting this next coming season to be the last year of that combo, as the expectation is the Saints will move on at quarterback because Drew Brees will retire. Now, obviously, Drew Brees might take it year by year, but if he did come back, could create some rumors that maybe they might not want to bring him back, because Sean Payton may be itching to get another guy in there. Cough, cough, Taysom Hill. But we'll have to see. Obviously, Sean Payton made some airwaves this offseason saying that Taysom Hill is a guy he's been molding to be the next starting quarterback of the New Orleans Saints potentially. He feels like he has the ability to do it. Obviously, a lot of people are not sure, are very skeptical, but he feels confident in him. He's going to be the backup quarterback to Drew Brees this year. And, obviously the Saints have been on the end of playoff disappointment after playoff disappointment after playoff heartbreak after playoff heartbreak. And it continued, like I said, this year with Minnesota losing in the final seconds to Kirk Cousins. And basically right now the Saints are at a point in their franchise with Sean Payton where it's just like, okay, we're good enough to win our division. We're good enough to win games. We're good enough to make the playoffs. But we're not doing anything when we get there. We're not executing and we're not playing like the Saints we played as during the season in the actual big game. So it's creating a lot of skepticism. It's creating a lot of question. Why is that the case? Why are we struggling to, be good? Why are we struggling to stay successful? Why are we struggling to do our thing? And I think it just really shows. I think it shows. The Saints, they added some guys this offseason. They added Emmanuel Sanders, which I think was a great addition for the New Orleans Saints. It's going to open up their passing attack a lot. Because one thing about the Saints, if you had a weakness on their offense, they really didn't have a second wide receiver. They really didn't have a guy who was a reliable second guy. You had guys who could make plays here and there, of course, but you didn't have a reliable second guy. And so, obviously, it didn't affect the receiving combo between Michael Thomas and Drew Brees. But, you always want to have a complete offense at all times, just so it feels like we can go anywhere. Where if Michael Thomas didn't have a great game, Emmanuel can have a big game now. It's just having that option, where the Saints is like, if somehow, you face a team that's able to kind of slow down Michael Thomas, well, who else on the receiving game is going to step up? And now having a guy like Emmanuel Sanders helps give them that other guy who can step up. Because Emmanuel Sanders has been a great second receiver for so many teams. And for Brees, I know that he loves this signing for him. I mean, the Saints this offseason have really just primarily just re-signed guys. They've re-signed a lot of guys. They've re-signed, they've re-signed a bunch of guys who they think are going to help them move forward. And that's who they have on their roster currently. The only other signing they really made worth noting is also what they made the signing to sign Malcolm Jenkins. Malcolm Jenkins was drafted by the Saints and part of their secondary in his earlier days. I believe he was on the Super Bowl team in 2009, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. I believe he was, though, and he won the Super Bowl with them. Went to Philadelphia, was manning that secondary there, came back to New Orleans, a veteran, a guy who can play well, good leadership, can keep the good leader, keep communication in secondary up. And basically the Saints just made signings where you're just trying to fill certain holes that may be a little bit weak but can get stronger. I always say when you're a team that's really good and really, in a way, complete, you really don't have as many changes to make in the offseason with rosters like that, because unless there's a lot of players coming up on contract that are going to want big money, you can't re-sign them all, you're pretty much in a good shape, because the Saints have done a good job of drafting young talent with veteran talent. So a lot of their young guys are still in the rookie deals, so they're not paying a lot to those guys who've already became great or good, very good players for them. And then when it is time, they can re-up Drew. They can re-up Michael. They can re-up Alvin. Think about it. Drew, if he retires, I mean, unless they sign a guy, you're either drafting a guy or Taysom Hill's your guy. And you're probably not giving them a ton of money. So, or what the quarterback market is today. So you're saving money at the quarterback position, and now still gives you flexibility to pay for other positions. And they've really done a good job of cap flexibility. And so they just filled up some loose ends, and they probably feel like after this draft, obviously drafting for the future, drafting some talent to help improve the team, they feel very confident that what they have is going to put them in the right direction moving forward and help them be successful going long term, moving long term, and doing what they have to do to just try to win another division. Obviously, the NFC South is tougher this year with Tom Brady entering with Tampa Bay and just, you know, the division in general has some of the best quarterbacks in the game and some of the best receiving combinations in the game, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I think the Saints are obviously going to still be a favorite in this division, as they should be, and we're going to have to see what happens. You know, this is going to be considerably Drew Brees' last hurrah. We don't know. Maybe that creates extra motivation. We've seen in the past Ray Lewis's career, Peyton Manning's career. You know, it's his last year. You know, even though Brees hasn't said that, that could motivate the team to play some of their best football this season. But that was your New Orleans Saints season in review. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the Seattle Seahawks right here on the podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the New Orleans Saints. I talked about how, you know, they're a very good team, but they've had playoff disappointments. But they're a team that you expect to always be in the running for a championship and to make playoffs year after year. Drew Brees come back for potentially his last season. You know, obviously Michael Thomas being one of the best receivers in the game. Alvin Kamara trying to get back to 2 years ago form. Adding Emmanuel Sanders and Malcolm Jenkins, tying up those loose ends with key veteran players who can produce. This Saints team, there's absolutely no reason to think that they can't come back out here again this year and compete and be able to win. Because they have all the potential in the world to be very successful, and I'm sure that they're going to come out and do what they got to do to be successful on the field. And, you know, the Saints are, they're going to be here. And they're going to be a tough out regardless of who plays them. Because as long as you got Sean Payton, Drew Brees, and that offense with that young great defense, it's not going to be an easy. It's not going to be easy Sunday or Saturday or Thursday or Monday you play these guys on. But now we're going to get into the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle Seahawks under Pete Carroll. I believe now he is the second longest tenured head coach in the NFL. Behind Bill Belichick. He's been with Seattle, I believe, since 2010. No, actually, he's been with Seattle since 2008, 2009. He's been with them since that long. He was able to strike gold in 2011 with Russell Wilson, third round quarterback, beating out Matt Flynn, who they had just signed that year to a contract to be their starting guy. And ever since then, you know, he was blessed with the Legion of Boom and, you know, all that. You know, the Seattle Seahawks now are a team who are very offensively predicated. They run the offense through Russell Wilson in that running game. Russell Wilson I like to say he's kind of like Tom Brady in his career. He's never really had a receiver who was dominant, except Randy Moss, which Tom Brady had. But he always has had good receivers who were good in the slot, good cutting out of breaks. You know, like Troy Brown for Tom, and Edelman, and Wes Welker, and, you know, guys like that. And Tom Brady uses his tight ends. He uses his tight ends. Regardless, and Seattle really never has, outside, I believe, Jimmy Graham that one time, any big-name tight ends. And he still uses any tight end they have on the roster. It makes them good. It makes them play well. You know, he's the guy who, right now, this offense is predicated on running the football. Obviously, at the end of last year, they had a cluster of running back injuries. You had Chris Carson go down. You had your backup, Rashad Penny, go down. you had, I can't remember the other guy, but you had 3 running backs go down. And so they had to bring Marshawn Lynch from retirement and Robert Turbin off the street just so they could have some running backs in the playoffs. Obviously, the running game wasn't the same. And that some people think if they were healthy at running back, they would have beaten the Green Bay Packers. But, Seattle is a team that no one really talks about. No one really says things about. But Seattle is a team that I think next year can compete for a Super Bowl if they stay healthy. They have an improving defense. Russell Wilson has shown he is a top flight quarterback in this game, so he can play with the best. He has an up and coming wide receiver in DK Metcalf, who is an absolute beast and who looks like an absolute freak specimen. He's getting tight ends back, and he's getting his running backs back, and offensive line getting healthy. Remember, offensive line a couple years was a problem for Seattle. They've kind of started to fix those problems slightly a little bit with Russell. Defensively, obviously, they haven't been the same, but they're young, and they play well enough. They still have their core. Bobby Wagner, considered one of the best linebackers in the game, still playing. One of the key decisions they still have yet to make this offseason is Jalavion Clowney. Obviously, Clowney is a free agency right now, but he wants big money. Seattle's not willing to give him big money, but no other team's willing to give him big money either. But Seattle has maintained that they still have interest in retaining his services if he wants to come back to the Seattle Seahawks. And I think that's something Jalavion will discuss. Obviously, with the coronavirus happening and everything happening, I don't think anyone's going to invest money into him. First, because with the coronavirus quarantining everybody, you can't get a physical. Clowney has dealt with injuries. And I just think people feel like, do I really want to invest this type of money into a player like this? So he might have to go back to Seattle on like a 1-year prove-it deal. We'll see if he does it. But I'm sure Seattle is like, you have to lower the price tag a little bit. So we'll have to see if they bring him back. But if they bring him back, they have a star defensive end on the defensive line. And, like I said, they're getting better as a team. So Seattle has, like I said, the potential to be a team to win it if everything aligns itself. Now, obviously, Seattle plays in one of the toughest divisions in football, the NFC West, with the Rams who, they have a lot of big names. They have talent. They could steal a game from you. They may have a better season than they had last year. The 49ers, who were just the runner-up Super Bowl champions, even though Seattle does match up with them well. I feel like Seattle was obviously the team that gave San Francisco the most trouble. And you have the up-and-coming Arizona Cardinals. So I feel like that Seattle has to get through that division. If they can get through that division, and obviously they're one of those divisions you expect to have at least 2 playoff teams from this year in the NFC. Potentially 3 if something, big goes down, or, third team has a great season also, but you expect to at least be 2, and you expect them to be one of those 2. And, when they get into the dance, doesn't matter if they're a top seed, a wild card, Seattle has a chance. Seattle can play in all elements. With Russell Wilson, you can win any game, any type of game. And the improvement of some of the young players that Seattle has in the roster will definitely dictate the success that they have moving forward. And like I said, keeping the running backs healthy so they can still provide a very formidable running game for Russell Wilson will also be very, very important and will be very, very crucial long term for them to be successful, for them to be, able to compete for a championship, and just for their success long term, as that's the blueprint they've always wanted since Pete Carroll has been in Seattle. Like I said, you just can't give enough credit to Russell Wilson. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, people never talk about Russell, But Russell has done so much for that organization, for that franchise. You could even say at this point, potentially for some people, he has overtaken Matt Hasselbeck as maybe the best quarterback they've had ever since. So, you know, we're gonna have to see. We're gonna have to see what they decide to do. Like I said, they have some decisions they got to make, but they have a very well put together team. They've done a lot of things right, and with that being known, you know, you really can't doubt this team. If you doubt Seattle, they'll sneak up and beat you, and they'll sneak up and surprise people. That's why you never want to sleep on a team like them, because they have all the talent and potential in the world to be one of the best teams in the NFL this year if everything goes as expected and they continue to move forward with their plans. And like I said, it always depends on the development of the team and the development of everybody to be successful and to execute at the end of the day so they can win. So Seattle's definitely in good shape. Pete Carroll has always had these guys ready to go. Always had these guys ready to play. That's what a true head coach does. Gets his guys ready to play. And you can't hate on that. So that's how I feel. But coming up next, because that was your Seattle Seahawks season in review, we're going to talk about the Washington Redskins right here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the Seattle Seahawks. We talked about their season. Seattle is a team that's championship ready in my opinion. Russell Wilson, one of the best quarterbacks, underrated teams Seattle is in general in the NFL. We talked about, you know, obviously a couple of things didn't go their way last year. Injuries happened, but they have a lot of young players that they think are going to get better. If they can stay healthy on the offensive backfield and at the offensive line, I don't see why Seattle can't compete. Because remember, if people, I truly believe this too, I'm one of those people. If they were healthy, they would have beat Green Bay, and they've matched up well against San Francisco in both games. So that game might have went either way, and Seattle could have been representing us in the Super Bowl against Kansas City. So I feel like they have just as well of a chance as they've ever had in previous years to do that again this year. So, you know, the Seattle Seahawks are a team that you don't want to sleep on, because they're a team that they're going to come at you and punch you in the mouth. Pete Carroll has instilled that into his guys, and they're going to come out every night, every Sunday, and do it. But now, we're going to talk about the Washington Redskins. Yes, the Washington Redskins. The Redskins, listen, it hasn't always been pretty. Has not always been pretty. They didn't have a good year last year. You know, Gruden was fired. They made some changes to the front office. They're trying to go in a different direction. They hired Ron Rivera to lead that because of what he instilled with Carolina. In the type of respect he demands when he walks into a room. You know, I think there's a lot of there is some talent with Washington. There's some talent with Washington. They have some guys. They just... The biggest question for them is just quarterback. Is Dwayne Haskins the answer? Is he the guy? Can he be the guy? I think that is the big question here. Now, they've been very, very active this offseason. They've signed Thomas Davis Sr., a guy that Ron Rivera coached in Carolina. A veteran linebacker, provides a solid foundation, solid leadership. They signed Sean Davis. He's a guy, safety from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He can play. A guy who adds depth to that secondary. Probably is going to give them some good play time. J.D. McKissick, kick returner, really somebody who can add, and somebody who can catch out of the backfield, adding versatility to the backfield with Adrian Peterson and Darius Geis. Also added Peyton Barter, another running back. Obviously, right now they have 4 running backs. Now, like I said, J.D. McKissick may be used more of a special teams guy. So if you go with the 3 running backs of Adrian Peterson, Peyton Barber, and Darius Geis, you have a pretty good quarterback there. Pretty physical running backs. Just 3 backs right there, I think. You signed Cornelius Lucas, a guy that added depth. They didn't have a swing tackle. He's a swing tackle. Nate Orchard also was another great signing. Another guy, come in, plays, give you some depth. They signed Kendall Fuller. He'll be a starter. He just won a championship with Kansas City. He'll bring a starter mentality, championship mentality, and help that secondary. Wes Schweitzer, guard, add some depth. They also added guys like Ronald Darby, another starting corner, a guy who can start for them day one. And Brandon Sheriff, obviously making sure he got back. That was very important because he's been one of their best players also. So if you think about it, a lot of the signings they've made this offseason to me have been shown of Ron Rivera. He is adding competition, leadership, players who've won, depth, and a different mentality. Now, obviously, in this year's NFL draft, they have the number 2 overall draft pick, and everybody's going and expecting them to add Chase Young, which I think that is the move. They should add Chase Young. Chase Young is a guy who add a lot to that defensive line, him and Ryan Kerrigan, and help them give 2 bookends to get after the passer. Because you got to get after the passer in today's NFL, especially with them playing in the NFC East. And really, we don't expect the Redskins to be that much better, but the Redskins season is basically dependent on Dwayne Haskins. Is he going to be the guy? Now, there's question. He may not even play to start the season because obviously Ron Rivera came out and said if somehow we only had a month in the season, well, Kyle knows the playbook. Obviously, Dwayne's having to learn this Carolina system. Kyle already knows it, which is probably the reason why he made this trade. Like I said, Ron Rivera is showing his smartness as a coach, knowing, okay, we don't know when we're going to get out here and practice. I need to bring in a guy at quarterback who can man the ship for a little bit, knows the system, so if we don't get as much time to practice, I know he at least knows what's going on. And then at that point, it's more about reps because everybody's going to be on the same point and level, really. And everything. But at some point in the season, you're going to see Dwayne Haskins out there, and that's going to be your big question. What can Dwayne Haskins do? What can Dwayne Haskins produce? Because listen, these situations are always the same. When a new regime comes in with a young quarterback that was not drafted by this regime, usually that means, okay, if you don't play well, you're not our guy. We never said you were going to be our guy. So we won't hesitate to find your replacement, to find a new guy. So Dwayne Haskins is kind of on a year where he has to play good. He has to. If he shows even just the slightest of flashes that can give him another year. Because the thing is this. Usually we would think, let's say the Redskins have a bad year and he plays terrible, throws like 25 interceptions. Well, he's going to be replaced. And if the Redskins don't have a good year, they'll be right up there competing next year for Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. But if Dwayne Haskins shows progression, shows his talent, shows that he's improving, that could be what gets him to that point where now he can at least play. Like I said, you don't have to be Russell Wilson a la, but you got to show that you can at least be comfortable. Can we win games with you? Do you play well? It's easy to sit here and say when you're an accomplished quarterback, if the team struggles, it's not him, it's the team. With Dwayne Haskins, the way he played, yeah, it's the team, but it's also Dwayne Haskins. And so you have to switch that narrative. Ron Rivera is one of the most respected coaches in this league. And he's going to bring in his type of system, his type of guys, which he's already done. So the Redskins, I feel like overall as a team will be better. It just really depends on if Dwayne Haskins can progress in his second year as an NFL pro, and can he move on? Because like I said, it's not going to look good if you can't get your job back from Kyle Allen. That's just not going to look good. And even if they have a true QB competition, it's not going to look good if you can't beat up Kyle Allen. Everybody knows what Kyle Allen is. He is a very good backup quarterback who can win you some games, but obviously over a long-term season, he's not going to win you the amount of games you probably need, but he can win you some. If you give him a good roster, Kyle Allen can go out there and play. It's not like he can't play. It's not like Ryan Lindley. If y'all remember him, y'all know what I'm talking about. He can play. You just got to put what you got to put in front. You got to put the right things in front of him for to be successful. And we'll see what Washington Redskins look like this year. It'll be interesting to see how Ron Rivera makes this team and how he moves them forward. Going into his ideal of what he wants this team to look like in his makeup. But that was your Washington Redskins season in review. Next segment, we're going to talk about the Minnesota Vikings and their season. Coming up right here on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about them Washington Redskins. We discussed really their season hinges on Dwayne Haskins. Because even if you're maybe not expecting to win, you're expecting the Redskins to play harder, play smarter, play with a swagger they haven't played with in a while, and the development of Dwayne Haskins. Ron Rivera has brought in a lot of guys who have a championship mentality, a winning mentality, trying to flip the Washington culture from a losing culture to a winning culture. It might take some years, but if it will really help if they know, all right, do we need to get a new quarterback or not? Because Ron Rivera has shown he can make the tough decisions, and if he has to, he'll do it. So, but now we're going to get to the next team, the Minnesota Vikings. So Minnesota coming off a divisional playoff loss to the San Francisco 49ers. Had for the most part, a good season. Can't complain. I mean, the only thing about Minnesota you wonder, with all the talent they've had, is what we think has been holding them back for so long. the quarterback position. They signed Kirk Cousins 2 years ago because they believed he was an upgrade over Case Keenum. And if Case Keenum could take this roster to the NFC Championship game, then Kirk Cousins should be able to too. Obviously, Kirk Cousins has his games where he's like, wow, this is why they brought him in. This is what they expect. And then he has those games where you're just like, I don't know. He just doesn't seem like he has it. A lot of people don't think he's that good right now. A lot of people don't think he's worth the money that they're paying him. I mean, people were shocked that they re-upped Kirk Cousins because Minnesota is making that hard commitment. Like, listen, this is our guy, and we're going to believe in him. Now, obviously, not everybody was particularly happy about this. I do believe that Stephon Diggs did not like Kirk Cousins as his quarterback. He felt like, I think the thing about the team, especially the receiving core of Minnesota, Thielen, you could say, is a top receiver, potential number one receiver. Diggs also. Diggs was always looked at as the bigger play guy than Thielen, even though Thielen was a big play guy too. And there were just some games where Diggs did not get the ball or he didn't get it to the same efficiency as everybody else. Because, like I said, Kirk Cousins has those games where it just seems like he can't get the ball to nobody. And you've seen frustration from both receivers about it. And I guess it affected Diggs more, where when they him up, that's when he made that tweet. Like, listen, I kind of want to leave. I kind of want to go to a new team. Which Minnesota eventually did agree to a trade with Buffalo Bills to trade him away to the Buffalo Bills, and they got a good package back for him. So now, if you're the Minnesota Vikings and you're looking at your roster, you're coming back, Dalvin Cook, if he's healthy, we know this offense is completely different when Dalvin Cook is healthy and he's playing well. This offense opens up a lot, and it really helps Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is one of those one of those quarterbacks you definitely want him to have a running game and not ask Kirk Cousins to win it himself. But you only got one elite receiver now. So someone else is going to have to step up. I wouldn't be surprised with how deep this wide receiver draft is if Minnesota uses one of their top picks on another wide receiver to replace Stephon Diggs. Now, they have struck out on a couple of guys, but they have hit on some guys. So if they can pick the right wide receiver this year, you can just fill that hole, and then you still have a very capable passing offense with Kirk Cousins. Still got Kyle Rudolph, still got Adam Thielen. So offensively they're good. Offensive line can sometimes be shaky. Obviously, Kirk Cousins, he's one of those guys you kind of need a lot of things going well for him. You kind of need everything working because he's not one of those guys that you expect to overcome, adversity. If there is adversity, you would rather not put Kurt in that situation if you don't have to. So I think that's something that, Minnesota does. I mean, you can tell by the way they game plan in every game they play. They game plan to not make Kirk Cousins have to throw it 40 times and win them the game. Their game plan is we want to be 50-50 on both sides. Now, obviously, they lost offensive coordinator Kevin Stefanski to the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, they had to bring a new guy in to run this offense. And we're gonna have to see what happens. We're gonna have to see what happens when it gets down to it. Minnesota, like I said, is a team that has always a lot of talent, and you just kind of wonder about will the quarterback position hold them back? Now, in terms of moves in the offseason, they really haven't made too many. They just re-signed a lot of guys: Anthony Halis, Dan Bailey, Anthony Harris, Amir Abdullah, Michael Pierce. They got Rashad Hill, Tajay Sharp. He's going to be a good receiver, a good slot guy. He'll definitely help. Britton Colquitt. Just nothing too crazy. Michael Pierce, a run stopper from Baltimore. Just the Vikings are in that safe territory. You're a very well constructed team. You don't really have a lot of gaping holes. So you're trying to tie up loose ends. You're trying to improve positions, maybe get younger at positions, but still stay at a good level at that position. maybe dealing with some cap. Obviously, when you have a very talented team, cap could become an issue because you got to make sure there's enough money to go around. It's just one of those things. So, Minnesota, they, like I said, they have some decisions to make in the draft. Now, I said they'll probably go receiver. They also could go corner. One thing that really let them down last year was to the secondary. Usually, Minnesota's had a top secondary because Xavier Rhodes, a former All-Pro corner, was always a shutdown. And then even the second guy, Trey Waynes, was not bad at all. And this season, I don't know what it was. I don't know if something changed. But they were both getting lit up in the secondary. And that secondary struggled. And so, that's why Trey Waynes is still there. But, he's kind of on the hot seat maybe with his job. And Xavier Rhodes was not re-signed. Xavier Rhodes is now on another team. He's on the Indianapolis Colts, signed there for a 1-year deal. So, secondary, you could also be a direction to go in the draft to fill that hole that was left. They definitely, like I said, if they can get that secondary straight, improve the offensive line a little bit, and Kirk Cousins is more consistent on the better side of things, it works. Literally, Kirk Cousins has had 3-4 game stretches where he looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And if they can just get him in the playoffs to play like that through the playoffs, Minnesota is one of those teams where it's just like they have the talent to be one of the best teams in the league, if not the best team. They have one of the top rosters. And I think that's why they're kind of like the college LSU Tigers. They're the NFL version of the LSU Tigers before Joe Burrow. Talent across the board. Had secondary, front seven, offensive line, running game, receivers. But the quarterback was always below average. The quarterback was always never good enough where when it came to those big games where in the NFL, primetime and playoff, college, just the best teams in your conference because, LSU plays the NFC, Alabama and them, they didn't show up. They didn't play well. Sometimes Kirk Cousins' big games does not play well. Has some of his worst games. It just makes you think. What all this talent are they going to lose all this talent one day and not get any type of real solid Super Bowl success? I mean, I'm not saying you want to settle for a Super Bowl appearance, but just getting to the Super Bowl shows it. The closest they've got was the NFC Championship game 2-3 years ago with Case Keenum. Who is now going to be a backup to Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. So, Minnesota's kind of like, listen, we got to start winning. We got too much talent and everything. We got to do what we got to do. And we got to win. The pressure's on Kirk Cousins. Everybody knows it. So, that was your Minnesota Vikings season in review. Up next, we're going to talk about the Detroit Lions right here on the podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we talked about the Minnesota Vikings. Ooh, the Minnesota Vikings. Yes, sir. We talked about the Minnesota Vikings. And We talked about, obviously, them always being a very talented team, one of the best rosters in the NFL year after year. The question really is just on Kirk Cousins. Can he be the guy to get them there? Obviously, they might feel like they had a little breakthrough with the fact that he played very well against the Saints and won. Obviously, the 49ers were the best team in the league last year. So you really can't sit here and say, oh, I mean, you obviously, you never, if he's a franchise quarterback, you always expect him to play well, but, it's one of those things where it's just like, listen, eventually we gotta get over the hump. One of these days, we gotta get over the hump. So, that's obviously going to be the big question, the big deal here. That's going to be the big, rambunctious, thing here. Is them getting over the hump, them making things happen, and them being constructively one of the best teams in the league. But now we're going to get into another team. A team that has been very mediocre for a long time as well. The Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have been the laughingstock of the NFL for so long. They're in the 2010s. They had a couple of seasons where they were better, but still had a lot of seasons where they were just like, especially at the end of the 2010s. Matt Patricia just looks like he just cannot get the job done. First year, there were reports players don't even like him. He's trying to make Detroit, New England, and it's just players are not respecting him. First year, they were healthy, just didn't play well. This year, you can make a case that, they started off 3-0-1. Then Stafford got hurt after they lost to that Monday Night Football game to the Green Bay Packers, where they were two phantom hands to the face calls. And then the season just crumbled from there. It just completely crumbled. And Matthew Stafford got hurt. He was out for the year. Injuries. So you can make an argument Detroit could have been better than 3 wins. But at the end of the day, they had 3 wins, and that's what it says on last year's record. So the pressure's on Matt. Literally, he has to win. If they come out the gate 0-4, 0-5, he's out of there. Simple as that. He's in one of those situations where he knows, if I don't do better, it's over. Obviously, Matthew Stafford's going to be coming back for another year. They have some guys. Kenny Golladay is one of the most underrated receivers in the game. Very, very, a very, very well very well receiving core. Him, it's funny because Detroit has always been a team that has always had good receivers at all times. It's just they don't ever have anything else. That's just me, but But they have talent. Now, obviously, the Detroit Lions have obviously tried to upgrade things. They signed Jamie Collins. He's been coached under Matt Patricia. Solid linebacker. Went from Cleveland, played for Cleveland last year. New England last year. And, he played well. He definitely will help that linebacking core in Detroit, add some defensive presence. Javon Curse, another guy who's played for the Minnesota Vikings last year, he's played well. He'll be added to the secondary. He's played well. Danny Shelton also played on New England. He played well. They signed former Falcon cornerback Desmond Trufant to be another starting corner. Obviously, this is to replace Darius Slay, who they traded to the Eagles this offseason. Valtai, tackle, comes from the Philadelphia Eagles. Help increase and improve the offensive line. Really overall, they've made some moves. They've done some things. They're doing what they got to do, but it's just you wonder about it. Are they going to be good enough? Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay, like I said, 2 good receivers. Danny Amendola is a good slot. Kerryon Johnson has showed some flashes. Bo Scarborough has showed some flashes. But it's just consistency. they've struggled to get consistency. That's what's hurt them the most. And, you know, Matt Patricia, like I said, is just on the hot seat because of that. Because they have to play better. They have to play better. No ifs, ands, or buts. They have talent on this team. They just have to be able to get the most out of this talent to win. And like I said, they're playing in a division where it's not the hardest division. Like, Green Bay is good, but they're not, I mean, you know, you expect Green Bay to be good, but I mean, it's you know, Green Bay's not terrible. They played Green Bay tough twice last year. They should have won the first game. Minnesota, we know how that go. They actually beat Minnesota last year. Chicago, we don't know what that quarterback situation is going to look like. So there is an opportunity for Detroit to make something happen this year if they can stay healthy, Matthew Stafford can stay healthy, and they get production. They have potential to make some noise. I always think that extra playoff spot is very interesting because you don't know what would be that magical record. Like, let's say the NFC has a down year next year with teams. And so let's say a 6 seed would be 9-7. So the team after that, for that 7th spot, could be 8-8, 7-9. Detroit won 3. All you got to do is win 4 more games. And you can make the playoffs. Now, that's just saying if the NFC had a down year when it came to the wild card teams. If they had the year they had last year, then they would have to have at least 10 to even get in. But let's say they have that type of year, and like let's say a 9-7 team gets in at this last spot at the 6th. Yeah, the 7th you'd be 8-8, 7-9. Detroit has the talent to kind of be around that record potentially. It just depends. If the players don't like Matt Patricia, if they don't feel like Matt Patricia is the best guy to coach them to be successful, as like I said, he's rubbed players the wrong way, and you know, we've had former players say he's absolutely horrible, and Darius Slay slandered him on interviews, and it's a done case. I think if you lost your locker room already, you already got players coming in there hearing this about you. I think they're already kind of like, I don't know. You know, and then if you lose, it just spirals out of control, and then you lose your locker room, and then 4 or 5 games in the season, they're like, I don't even want to play anymore. Not for him. So, you know, Matt Patricia is going to have to be on some strings and needles this year. He's going to have to be on some strings and needles. He can't come into the situation thinking he can just do whatever he wants. Because if this is being said about you, we don't know how many of the players may feel that same way. There were rumors they were thinking about trading Matthew Stafford. His wife came out saying, listen, I think they want those rumors out there. I think they want him gone. And then there were rumors that Matthew wanted to be gone. I mean, we don't even know who wants to even be on Detroit right now. I mean, Detroit has a history that's just like, as a player, you never think, oh, I'd love to play for the Detroit Lions one day. But at the same time, it's like, if you have a guy that nobody wants to play for, that just adds and contributes to the whole problem right there. So they're definitely going to have to figure out what their plan is moving forward. If this is like Matt Patricia's last year, which I think a lot of people expect it to be, you know, you're back to the drawing board again if you're Detroit. And it sucks because, you know, Detroit is such a great fan base in general, a great sports city. And, you know, NFL could really be big there if they just had a consistent winner. It really could be big. But it just doesn't happen for them like that. And it's disappointing for that city of Detroit. Obviously, with the Pistons, too, not playing that well, Detroit's looking for something to kind of be happy about in terms of the sporting world outside of hockey and baseball sometimes. But that was your Detroit Lions season in review. Next segment, we're going to go into the last team of the NFC, the new look Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Podcast, where we talk about football. This one, the GSMC Football Podcast, baby! So, last segment, we talked about the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions, who have gone through a very troubled past, very troubled history. They're like that very troubled ex. Even after 3 years after they broke up, you ever just check on them, you see they're still troubled. That's what the Detroit Lions are. A team that has always been in the face of infamy. And just a lack of success. It looks like Matt Patricia's going to get fired after this year. I don't think Detroit's going to be that great this year. They have potential. Like I said, they have potential. Like, I look at this roster. This roster isn't bad. It's just, is Matt Patricia the right guy for the job? That's just my big question. So, you know, we'll see what happens with Detroit this year, but it's not looking great. I'm sure when I'm doing season previews, we'll see if my tone slightly changes on them. But now, last team on the NFC we're going to review are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers... Oh, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The big surprise, the big splash team this year. They picked up the GOAT of quarterbacks, Tom Brady. That a lot of people feel like was the GOAT of quarterbacks, Tom Brady. They replaced Jameis Winston, who threw 30 touchdowns, 35 turnovers in general. They have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, two number one receivers. O.J. Howard has potential to be one of the best tight ends in this game. A very young and up-and-coming defense. I mean, on paper, Tampa Bay looks great. And then you're bringing Tom Brady into this. A guy who, really in New England, has made always the most of what he's had. He has made always the most of everything. He's never had just formidable offenses year after year after year. Outside that year of Randy and Wells and all of them, he's never had just formidable offenses year after year after year. And you could arguably say, potentially, this could be one of, if not one of the best offenses he's ever been a part of. Even at his advanced age of 43, I think Brady has declined, but I don't think it's to a point where you can't win. And I think we're going to see that this year with Tampa. You know, Bruce Arians is a guy who has been known as a quarterback guru, a guy who's very well respected, great offensive mind. I think the fit is good. I don't think that's a bad fit, quarterback, head coach. And I think that, and I think that the biggest challenge for Tampa to me right now is continuity with Tom, because with this coronavirus, we don't know when Tom is going to work out with the receivers. We don't know when he's going to be able to work on the playbook with these guys. Tom's been used to continuity for all his life. He's always ran almost the same offense in New England. He usually always had 2 or 3 players every year that was there. So he always had guys, and everybody else could just catch up to speed, and then he used them later in the season. This is the first time where he's had to undergo a full change. New personnel, new system, new city. That's going to be a big change for him. And then you don't have the ability to have that hands-on work with them whenever you want. That also can create problems and issues. Because you don't know when. Now, I don't know if it's going to dramatically affect them in terms of their potential this season. Maybe. We'll have to see. But I'm sure at some point Tom's going to be able to get in contact with these guys and start working out with these guys. I think, Tampa is going to be everybody's, they're going to make it to the Super Bowl team because of Tom. I mean, remember, Tampa Bay hasn't had this kind of excitement around their team in years, where they were like, we legitimately could make it to the Super Bowl this year. Like, we legitimately could do it, guys. Like, we have a reason to kind of get hyped. Before it was, we have talent, we got to see what Jameis does, see what happens with Brice, see what happens with the last guy, we'll see how it turns out. There was always a lot of potential with Tampa to be great. But then, like I said, was Jameis Winston what was holding them back? And, with Tom now, that excuse is out the book. You can't look at Jameis as holding you back. It's all in from here if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you think Tom Brady was the key and the missing piece, I could see them having a Super Bowl or bust mentality this year. Now, obviously, people like to say Tom's going to the tougher side of the NFL, the NFC. He's in a tough division of the NFC South. There are some obstacles here. And so, we'll have to see how Tom looks in this first year. Now, overall, like I said, Tampa Bay is a very well-constructed roster. By no sort of the imagination, it's like they aren't. Now, also, they do have some things also they need to fix. Secondary still needs to get that resolved. They've not been great from the secondary a lot. Also, Tampa Bay just got new uniforms, so obviously, I like them. It's kind of going back to their throwback uniforms, old uniforms. I like them a lot. So obviously, they're rebranding. They're doing some things. They still got Jason Pierre-Paul, Ndamukong Suh, Shaquille Barrett. They lost some guys, Peyton Barrow, Carr Nassib, Rashad Perriman. But for the most part, they have their most of their players in place. And, they, like I said, they're in position right now to be the team. It's going to be great seeing those matchups with Tampa. Drew Brees versus Tom. Matt Ryan versus Tom. Teddy versus Tom. But one thing I want everybody to understand is, if Tampa Bay is successful, don't just say this is all of a Tom Brady thing. They have talent. They have receivers. They have star defensive players. They have a great coach. It would be more disappointing if they didn't do anything. Because listen, you never know how an NFL season is going to go, especially with this coronavirus. You don't know if that could potentially cause more injuries. I mean, you really don't know. You hope not, but you don't know. Tampa Bay has expectations to be great next year. So far, they've made the necessary upgrades to put them in the right direction. Draft-wise, I could see them going secondary. Or I could see them going running back. I feel like those are your two biggest needs. Tom's always had a guy in New England where he could go give it to him out of the backfield, a la James White, Deion Lewis. Tampa really doesn't have that. So I would not be surprised if they make a good selection later, mid-round, second day of the draft, third day of the draft, find a running back that fits that mold for Tom. And also, like I said, trying to get that secondary right. Like I said, maybe get some safety corner help. Obviously staying young in those positions, but getting help. Adding maybe some offensive linemen, stuff like that. Trying to get, really with Tampa is they're trying to finish out this roster, finish out this team. Like I said, do the loose ends, figure out what is the last couple of pieces here and there we can make to help put us on the trajectory moving up and forward where we think, okay, with this team on paper and what we think we can put out there on the field, this team's going to give us our best chance to make it to the Super Bowl, which is in Tampa this year, which would be the first time ever in NFL history of a team that's hosting the Super Bowl makes it to the Super Bowl. Expectations are huge in Tampa. Everybody's excited. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And that's all we're going to have for today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast. Don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts on the GSMC Podcast Network. Don't forget to follow us on social media. I am your host, Brice Lewis, signing out. Have a good day. Stay healthy out there.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.